What's up, everybody? John Delarose here, the leading Hispanic voice in science fiction, coming back with another Comics Writer Pro Secrets. There is, I guess, some hard truths about selling books overall, and a lot of it does not really matter how talented you are, how good of a story you wrote, anything like that, but it matters what the market's expecting and what the market's interested in as a concept. And so, as an artist, you kind of have, you've got a spectrum of choices, right? You've got, on one hand, you want to have your artistic vision that is very interesting and beautiful, all that. And on the other hand, you have what the market's craving and what the readership is interested in. And so, it's your job as a writer or as an artist or whatever you're doing in this capacity to sort of gauge where that market is and have a happy medium to where you can both satisfy your artistic fun and have something that works to market. Now, this is actually the reason I'm showing this is because the Dynamite Thor project here is in a lot of ways a failure to write to market. And I want to kind of warn in the Comics Writer Pro Secrets here that, and of course, critique my own stuff so I can get better at providing things for the audience, which is beneficial for everybody too. That it's easy to get blinded when you're interested in something and you've got a passion for something when the audience doesn't necessarily have that same passion. And so I've very much always been into these like public domain superheroes, right? So I should pull the stuff up before public domain superheroes. But here we go. So if you go into public domain superheroes, I've been perusing these for years, and there's lots of awesome, cool superheroes. Amazing Man, for example. He's amazing. Look at that. We have Captain Battle, whose name is Jonathan Battle, of course. But there's lots of these characters out here which have been unused for a long time. You can peruse these forever and find some very interesting concepts. And I, of course, found Dynamite Thor a long time ago. Let's see if we can get to D. So I can show you this. A long time ago, I just scrolled through these all the time just for fun, just for kicks. And I found Dynamite Thor. And I thought, wow, this is a pretty interesting, silly thing. And it kind of became something I was just like very interested in. Well, it turns out, if I would have looked at the market for public domain old superheroes, I would have found a project on Indiegogo, which was actually had a great comic artist or writer, Chuck Dixon, involved with the project a while back. And that one, even with his involvement and with some other popular indie creators' involvements, didn't make its funding goal because there's just not that huge of a market for the public domain readership. A lot of people who are kind of just starting out kind of get involved in this public domain stuff and make some pretty amateurish comics overall. It happens. And so these public domain comics don't typically have much legs to them. And if somebody with a name like Chuck Dixon couldn't make a Kickstarter work in terms of his funding, it's going to be very difficult for me to do so. Now, as you see, I did make my funding. I had what I did to counter this was I had a very inexpensive process and a great artist who was willing to work with me in terms of sharing profitability rather than me paying an upfront cost. Now, this took a lot of his time, and you have to think about those sorts of things when you're writing. If you have an artist and you're not going to make a huge dollar amount for them, you might not get to work with them again. I think that's not the case here. I think he understood the project he was getting into. But what it came down to is I ended up with about half the backers that I have on my regular projects. And part of that is because there were some issues early on with the Kickstarter, not being able to see the project. Part of it was that, of course, we've got the coronavirus thing going on now, so it's hard to get people to spend money. But the other part of this is I did not write to the indie market for comics. And the indie market for comics is not, for one, it's superheroes are not really where that's at for the most part. The whole Cape thing is tough, even though I have a market for Cape readers with Metagirl. That's typically the case that most independent comics readers want to read something else. Otherwise, they just read Marvel or DC, right? Number two, this public domain thing adds that to where it's even worse because people see this is something from 50, 70 years ago, kind of dated. It's not even John's own creation. And so, maybe we'll just pass on this one because it's just a public domain thing. And that's what happens there because I didn't write to market. Now, I wrote my own story. This isn't an indictment of the quality of it because the people who have read it are saying it's fantastic, of course. And I've had a few people I've sent the book out to already. It's got my same writing, got my same level of skill there. It's got great art on it. It's got a cover by Ron Frenz, who is one of the best artists to ever work for Marvel Comics. So all of that was working fine for it. It's just I didn't write to the market. I didn't give the product that the market wanted or expected. So how can this benefit you? So if you're looking at your project and you are saying, hey, is this something that's a pet interest of mine that even though it's a cool concept, doesn't necessarily have anything to do with whether the concept's good or bad or not. Does this appeal to the audience I'm trying to reach? And look at that, look at the factors of that, and you can say, I'm trying to reach an indie comic reading audience. I'm trying to reach an older audience who, wants more mature stories. I'm trying to reach a younger audience who wants, really less violent stories, something different. You look at those different factors and try to see where you're trying to target your advertising and target what people are going to see of your project and try to match it with what you're trying to do there. And then you'll have a little bit more of success. So I'm going to take from this something to learn, obviously, that the public domain superhero thing with the capes, probably not the best spot for my audience. And I'll probably not push these sorts of projects in the future. Now, when I'm a little bigger and I can afford to just do whatever I want and kind of mess around, maybe I'll come back to it because I do love these sorts of things. This is in my interests. I love reading these old stories. I love remastering the old stories. And I love, bringing back these dead characters to life because it's very interesting to me. But for now, I still need to build the audience and not detract from it with projects that are outside of the scope there. So we'll be going back to Flying Sparks Volume 4 on a crowdfund. That's a tried and true winner. Everybody loves that series, and I have a great audience following for it. So I will be able to write to that market and appeal to those people exactly the way I have the last 3 crowdfunds I've done with that series. And then after that, I know that my target audience really loves this like strong male lead, Conan the Barbarian, sort of like sword and sorcery or science fiction sort of thing. So I'll probably be moving more into that direction since that's what my readership likes in general. I know that from my Justified book series, which I wrote to market last year. And I'll show you this, Nano Templar. This is a book I wrote to market, and I watched it, and it took off. This became a #1 bestseller very quickly. People hailed it very quickly. I got a lot of reviews very quickly for it. And it continues to just trickle in sales to this day. Well, if you look what I did, I knew who my audience is. I knew they want like a pretty badass male lead. I know that they like laser swords and want something to replace what Star Wars was to them before these last couple of movies. So I did something in the vein of that. I added in a Christian messaging because both me and my audience are very into that. And boom, I have a best-selling hit. So this is the opposite. This is where I do take into the mind of the market and don't look at what I'm necessarily looking at as my own passion. Well, this is my passion too. Like I said, there's a happy medium you can find. But I didn't let that blind me. I knew this was going to be a success, and it was a success. So I will take from that what my market is, and refine that as I will. And I hope this helps you so that you can kind of take these examples and do what you need to find your market. It may not be the same as mine, but that's fine. People have different tastes, and that's what we'll find out over the next few years of experimenting with different stories. All right. If you like these comics, Writer Pro Secrets, hit that like and subscribe button, guys. I will be back soon. Leave a comment. Are you ready to market? Are you just doing your passion project, doing something in between? I think everything's fine. It's just you have to have expectations for results based upon what you do in those regards. All right. See you guys soon.